In yesterday's episode, we finally discovered what was wrong with Kaisar. Depending upon how we decided to resolve that problem, either Kaisar or Lucius gives us our next task. And that was just a small little thing like assassinating the president of the NCR. Thankfully, the Legion already has a frumentarius near Hoover Dam named Cato who's been collecting valuable intel. Our task now is to rendezvous with Cato and prepare for our assassination attempt. To find Cato, we head south of Hoover Dam. He has pitched a small camp between the Cazador Nest and Ranger Station Delta. We find him dressed as a scaver.
Didn't expect Kaisar to send a woman to do this job. Oh well, at least you're here now. I was starting to get lonely out here by myself.
Nice to meet you too.
So you're the big shot that Kaisar put in charge of this mission. I've heard about you. You've got quite the reputation already.
Let's get on with this.
Right. Straight to business. Good. No wonder Kaisar sent you. Well, let's get down to business. Once we get started, we're going to be on a tight schedule. Are you ready to do this?
Yes, I'm ready.
Good. Now Kimball is scheduled to give his speech tomorrow. We'll rest here tonight and talk over the plan first thing in the morning. Get some sleep. You got a big day ahead of you.
At dawn, we awaken to find Cato dressed as a Brahmin baron.
Rise and shine. You have a big day ahead of you. So, do you have a plan for how you're going to kill Kimball?
It's none of your business.
Fine. Be like that. I'm just here to give you whatever information I can to help you get the job done. If you don't need my help, that's fine with me.
I don't need a plan to put a bullet in his head.
True, but I don't think it'll be that easy. Going in guns blazing with all the NCR troopers and rangers stationed at the dam will just get you killed. I do have some information that you might find useful, if you're interested.
Honestly, I haven't given it much thought.
You better start thinking about it soon. We're on a limited time schedule.
Of course I have a plan.
Prepared already. I like it. There's no need to give me the details. It is probably best that way. Even though you already have a plan, I may have some information that you might find useful.
What sort of information do you have?
I've been spying in the dam for quite a while now. I've gathered quite a bit of information from various sources.
Do you have any suggestions about the assassination?
Suggestions, huh? I'd suggest you play to your strengths. There's probably plenty of ways to kill Kimball. Just find one that works best for you. We'll have a few hours before he arrives. You should look around and see if you can find anything that you can use. Just be careful. You don't want to cause a scene before Kimball even shows up.
What sort of intel have you gathered?
I've been able to get some basic information on the schedule for Kimball's visit, as well as getting some rough security details.
Tell me about Kimball's schedule.
The president is scheduled to arrive sometime in the afternoon. It's going to be a short visit to boost morale for the NCR troops. He's going to arrive, give a speech, and then leave. No meet and greet, no questions, just a quick in and out. They're probably afraid something is going to happen. For good reason. I wasn't able to find a final itinerary for his visit, but if you can find one, you can get more details on what's going to happen.
Give me the security details.
Security is going to be tight. Rangers are stationed all around the observation deck where Kimball is going to give his speech. Security is led by a Ranger Grant. He's a pretty rough guy who's seen a lot of combat. It's best if you steer clear of him. The crowd consists of troopers and a few select civilians who were lucky enough to bribe their way in. They shouldn't cause much trouble for you. Finally, there's the additional security that Kimball will be bringing with him. I wasn't able to find out much on that. If I had more time in their computers, I could have accessed the full duty roster and guard deployment. Maybe you'll have better luck.
How are we getting into the dam?
I have some disguises for us. I've already got mine. A wealthy Brahmin baron who bribed his way into seeing the president. As for you, I have an NCR trooper uniform that I acquired. It'll fool most of the troopers and civilians, but it probably won't fool the Rangers.
So the Rangers will be able to see through our faction disguise. That complicates things. Is there anything else you can do to help?
Well, I have a bomb here that can be put on the vertibird that will detonate at a certain altitude. But it's a little unstable and dangerous.
We can pass a 50 explosives check to say I'm familiar with explosives. Give it here.
Here you go. Put it to good use.
All right. I think I'm done with my questions.
If there's nothing else, then we should get moving.
Let's go.
You're the boss. I'll be in the crowd. Do whatever you need to do. Then find me before Kimball arrives. Here's your disguise. This'll get you past most of the NCR there. But watch out for the Rangers. Odds are this won't fool them. I'll meet you there. Good luck.
He gives us NCR trooper armor and then runs off. Now, any NCR faction disguise will work, not just the one he gives us, but I went ahead and used what he gave me. When ready, we follow the road south, then east to Hoover Dam. Now, I played this mission while siding with Robert House, which is the same as the NCR version of the mission. We have to protect President Kimball from being killed. If you'd like to see how that mission turned out, you can watch my video on it here. But it's an entirely different ballgame now that we're on the other side. As an assassin, we've got to think about it differently. As we approach, we see the visitor center with the vertibird landing pad directly in front of us. It's being patrolled by a soldier and a dog. Off to the northeast, we see a large howitzer right next to the stage. That must be where President Kimball's going to give his speech. We'll start by going through the front door to the visitor center.
Check your fire.
Oh no! Oh, that must have been a ranger. Sure enough, taking a look at his armor, he's wearing ranger armor. As Kato told us, rangers can see through our faction disguise. And the rangers don't just wear the riot patrol face masks. Sometimes they wear the long ranger dusters, sometimes they wear more humble-looking ranger armor like this guy. So we have to be very careful. Thankfully, the Rangers patrol. However, the Ranger dogs can see through my faction disguise too. Gosh dang it. So waiting for both the ranger and his dog to walk away, we can open the front door to the visitor center. Thankfully, we don't find a single ranger inside. This entire lobby level was practically deserted. Kato said that he didn't know what the president's itinerary was. Well, perhaps we can find out more information by accessing the front desk terminal right next to the Hoover Dam snow globe. But this is locked with an average lock. After hacking it, we find a number of entries. I read each of these entries in my video about the NCR side of this quest, so I'll briefly sum them up here. In the Hoover Dam security report, we learned that only members of the president's security team are allowed to have weapons. This means that if we unholster our weapons at any time, the NCR will fire on us, regardless of our faction disguise. We also learned that the president is only traveling with 2 rangers. So if we can somehow get to President Kimball before he joins the security team by the stage, it may be an easier fight. In the duty roster, we learned that the NCR has many rangers on patrol securing the perimeter, but this note doesn't tell us how many there are. There are some around the stage, and they have sharpshooters on the visitor center's roof, the Western Ridge, and Dam Tower 1 roof. So there are 3 snipers watching what's going on. This is important to bear in mind in case we choose to go guns blazing. That's 3 enemies we'll have to get rid of first. In the engineering report, we learned that there's an error with the flight control computer aboard the president's vertibird. We learned that after the president lands, an NCR engineer has clearance to examine the vertibird's flight control computer. This is great news because if we can somehow masquerade ourselves as an NCR engineer, we won't raise any suspicions if we want to tinker with the vertibird. And finally, we learn that the computers here at the visitor center will update the vertibird system once it lands. This is excellent news. Perhaps we can hack into whatever update system they have on these computers to sabotage the vertibird. And indeed, backing out of this entry, we find one called Flight Control Update. After we access it, we find one option to modify the update settings. Flight control software updated. Warning, corruption detected in software settings. Flight control systems will be compromised. With that, we have sabotaged the computers here at the visitor center. Now when President Kimball's vertibird lands, it'll download the corrupted flight control settings that we just compromised, which means after it takes off, it won't be able to fly. This is possibly the easiest way to achieve our mission. After hacking the terminal, we can head outside and move towards the crowd. Kato told us to check in with him here once we're ready to begin.
Make it quick. We don't have much time.
I'm all set. When does the president arrive?
Good timing. Looks like his vertibird is arriving early. Here it comes now. I hope you're up for this, because we won't get a second chance.
As soon as we check in with Kato, we trigger the event. The president's vertibird emerges from over the hills to the northwest. It then flies wide over the stage and lands atop the visitor center. Then, just as we read in the terminal, President Kimball emerges from the visitor center flanked by only 2 rangers. We have to be careful not to stand too close to the president as he walks by, as these rangers can see through our faction disguise. He then walks to the stage and begins his speech.
Thank you, my fellow Californians.
His speech is well over 2 minutes long. But remember, during this speech, the vertibird is downloading the updated flight control patterns, the ones that we sabotaged. And since we've already essentially completed our mission, we have to wait through this speech before we find out whether or not it worked. Once the president finishes his speech, the crowd cheers. He and his ranger guards head back to the visitor center. He then boards the vertibird and takes off. The vertibird begins to spin wildly. It flies over the western hills, begins to correct itself, but then takes a nosedive. And with that, we complete Arizona Killer. The crowd disperses, but the rangers begin to patrol, looking for the saboteur. So if we don't get the heck out of here as soon as possible, we'll get killed. That is only one of many ways to complete this quest. I'm going to show you each and every one that I was able to find. The next option is to find some way to take advantage of this huge howitzer on the side of the dam. Surely it's not there just for decoration. Perhaps we can commandeer it. As we strategically squeeze between these 2 rangers on guard, we can walk past the crowd and up towards the visitor center. Here, we find a console next to a ham radio on a table, but there is 1 ranger stationed here. We have to wait for this ranger to move away. Soon, the ranger moves beyond our sight. He walks through a barricade and then peers over the ledge of the dam. But we have to wait for him to move even from this position and walk all the way around the vertibird landing pad. Only then is he far enough away for us to sneak closer to a console that we see right next to this ham radio. Hoover Dam Gun Control Console. This is the control console for the anti-aircraft gun atop Hoover Dam. We can leave it alone, examine the gun controls, or examine the gun circuit board. We'll start by examining the gun controls. You examine the controls that activate the gun. You may be able to reactivate the gun and set it to shoot down the president's vertibird, but this requires a science skill of 50 or greater. If we do, we can choose Activate the Anti-Aircraft Gun. You repair the gun controls and set the anti-aircraft gun to attack any nearby aircraft. With this task complete, we now have to sneak back. But I got careless going down the stairs. Gosh dang it, there was a ranger right next to this table with a helmet on it, and she saw through my disguise. So being much more careful this time, we can sneak down the stairs, and after the ranger moves, check in with Kato. He has all the same dialogue he had before, and when done talking, the vertibird arrives. But this time, the huge howitzer begins to turn towards the president's vertibird. It blows the vertibird out of the sky, sending the crowd running. Even if we flee with the crowd, we still attract the attention of the rangers. So we either have to find a place to hide and wait for the activity to die down, or book it as fast as we can. This method of assassination is the fastest method. It's the only method that doesn't require the vertibird to land first, and one of the few that doesn't force us to listen to the president's speech. The other option we found on this damn gun control console was to examine the gun's circuit board. You examine the circuit board on the gun console. You may be able to short it out and cause the gun to explode during the speech, but this requires a repair skill of 50 or higher. If we choose to short out the circuit board, we cut a few solders on the circuit board and rewire it to slowly build up a charge that will cause the gun to explode sometime during the speech. When done, we can again sneak back down to the crowd and check in with Kato. The vertibird arrives, lands, but I was standing just a bit too close to the rangers. Somehow they saw through my disguise and opened fire. So trying again, this time standing well enough back, we wait for the president to ascend the stage and begin his speech. Now remember, this entire time, the anti-aircraft gun is building up a charge. We already broke the connection. It's inevitable that it's going to explode. We just don't know when. But then, about halfway through the speech, the explosion blows President Kimball off the stage and over Hoover Dam. We can turn tail and book it. We noticed that Kato goes inside the visitor center. I wanted to know why, so I followed him in, but this isn't a good place to hide. There are plenty of people inside by now who will shoot at us. The next option is a good old straightforward sniper assassination. But we can't assassinate the president if he's not here, so when we're ready we can talk with Kato, and after the conversation the vertibird lands. While the vertibird is landing, we need to find a sniper's roost. We can choose any position we like best, the western ridge, the vertibird landing pad, or we can head on over behind the stage to the Hoover Dam Tower. This is where Kaiser placed a sniper whom we had to defeat in the NCR version of this quest. However, unlike in that quest, we find the front door locked and it requires a key. So while the other assassin was able to sneak up behind the ranger on top of this tower, we instead have to climb the ladder on the tower's face, giving us no opportunity to hide.
Got you now. Come on!
Thankfully, this ranger was so far away from the stage that no one saw what we just did. Turning around, we see the president arriving at the stage. We wait until he arrives at the podium, and then, with his back turned,
Thank you, my fellow Californians, who have come so far to answer the call to service.
got him. Even though the front doors were locked, after ascending the tower, we can retreat through the hatch on the top. Heading downstairs, we can open the previously locked door to Hoover Dam. Choosing this method is wise because it offers the easiest path of escape. We're not standing right in the middle of the crowd, and we can creep on over to the western side of the dam and hide behind a rock until the coast is clear. And if we're not seen, we can simply fast travel away. The next option is to plant the bomb that Kato gave us on the vertibird. But I found this to be much more difficult than it should be. After the vertibird lands and the president leaves the visitor center, I had planned to just sneak inside and use the stairway inside to reach the roof. But I found that after the president arrives, the entire visitor center locks down. These big double doors at the top of the stairs were locked and required a key. So I snuck around front, waited for the ranger to leave, and tried to go through the front door, only to discover that this too was now locked and required a key. This leaves only one way to the top of the helipad, and that's to pass through the southeastern barricade being patrolled by a ranger and Private Jensen to climb a ladder to the top. Even though I waited for the ranger to walk away, if we get too close,
Over here!
he sees through our disguise. But even if the ranger has walked away, Private Jensen won't let us through.
Only engineers and authorized personnel are allowed
We
upstairs.
enjoy our
Please
privileges
step
because
away.
you take
No one can go
greatest
upstairs
risks
without
and are
authorization.
prepared to
Why the lockdown?
The president is visiting today. Ranger Grant doesn't want anyone snooping around up there that doesn't have authorization.
Who's authorized to go upstairs?
If you have to ask, you're not authorized.
I've always wanted to see the president's vertibird.
Sorry, no can do.
We can pass a 50 speech check to say, "Pretty please."
Okay, just this once. Make it quick, though. I don't want to get in trouble for this.
Or if we can't pass the speech check, we recall that engineers are cleared to go up there. Remember, we read in the terminal that an engineer was going to be fixing the flight control computer. So now we just need to find an engineer costume. There are a couple ways we can go about this. We can try to pickpocket one. If we open the front door to the visitor center, we find an NCR engineer hanging out here on the ground floor. He's wearing his white engineer jumpsuit. Or we can head behind the stairs and open a door to a supply closet. Inside, we find some lockers to the right, and in the rightmost locker, we find an NCR engineer jumpsuit. Note that we have to loot these before we talk to Kato, otherwise all the doors to the visitor center are locked. Now that we're disguised as an engineer, Private Jensen waves us through.
We enjoy our privileges because you take
We can then scale the ladder on the side to the helipad. At the top, all we have to do is get close to the vertibird and activate it. You are looking at the presidential vertibird. This is a perfect place to put a bomb to kill President Kimball. This requires an explosive skill of 50 or higher. If we have it, we can plant the bomb. When done, we creep back down and integrate into the crowd. Then, we simply wait for Kimball to finish his speech. When done, Kimball and his rangers board the vertibird and take off. And then we gotta book it. I found that after we successfully assassinate the president, the Rangers all race for the road. I suppose in an attempt to block it off. So knowing this, if we're fast enough, we can get there before the others. In my game, Ranger Stevens always beat me, so I did have to kill him.
Check your fire.
But that's only one ranger. If we're fast, we can make it before the others catch up, and in so doing, escape. Another way is only open to us if we have some bricks of C4. Before the president arrives, we see a man without a helmet standing near to the gate. Every other NCR trooper is wearing a helmet. Why isn't this guy? We can step forward and ask him.
Have you seen my helmet? I can't seem to find it.
We can lie and say, "Do you mean the helmet I just threw off the dam?"
You big joker, you. You're funny, I like you. I really need to find my helmet, though. Thanks anyway.
No, I haven't seen it.
That's too bad. I need it for the ceremony. I need to look my best. And I need my lucky helmet. I'll just have to keep looking. Thanks anyway.
What do you know about the president's visit?
He's coming to give a big fancy speech to all us troops stationed here at the dam. I'm pretty excited. He seems like such a nice guy, and I get to meet him. He's giving me a medal. I don't know why, though. I'm just doing my job like all the other guys. I'm still excited, though.
Tell me about yourself.
Mama always told me not to talk to strangers. But you seem like a nice person. Mama left me on a farm when she went out prospecting. But when she never came back, the owner didn't want me around. Kicked me out on my own. A nice guy came up and asked me if I wanted to join the NCR, so I did. Now the troopers are my family. I like it here. Everyone is so nice.
All right. Goodbye, Jeremy.
Bye-bye.
So this is Private Jeremy Watson, the man whom Kimball is going to be rewarding with the Star of the Sierra Madre. But wait a minute. Missing helmet. We remember seeing one. That's right, there's a helmet on this table right next to where the ranger likes to stand. Getting close, we see that we can examine it, but that ranger is coming back to the table. So heading up the stairs, we can wait for the ranger to pass by. And when enough time has gone, yeah, she's walking the other way. We can walk up and examine it. This is Private Watson's helmet. If you had C4 and a detonator, you could rig up a nice little surprise for the president. This requires an explosive skill of 50 or higher. Thankfully, I do have some C4, so we can hide it in the helmet. You quickly cram a brick of C4 into Watson's helmet and rig it to your detonator. This will really blow their minds. Okay. With the C4 planted, we can tell Private Watson that we found his lucky helmet.
I still haven't found my lucky helmet yet.
Your helmet's right over there.
It's always in the last place you look. I wonder why that is. There it is! Thanks, lady, you're the greatest!
With that, Jeremy races over and dons his lucky helmet. When ready, we talk to Kato to start the event. The president lands, moves to the stage, and begins his speech. We can now detonate this C4 at any time. I wanted to choose the moment when Private Watson was closest to the president. If we wait until about halfway through the speech, President Kimball has Jeremy Watson step forward to give him the Star of the Sierra Madre. This is the closest he'll ever be to the president during the speech, so we can pull out our detonator.
Private First Class Jeremy Watson. On behalf...
I feel horrible about this. President Kimball goes flying like a rag doll, and Jeremy, headless, gets tossed into the Colorado. Oh. Now, I wanted to see what else I could do with my C4 here. I also wanted to see if I could recreate one of the ways that Caesar's Legion tries to assassinate Kimball if we do the NCR playthrough. we remember reading in the terminal that if anything happens here at the dam, President Kimball has a safe room on the top floor of the visitor center. In the NCR playthrough, we failed the quest if at any time we allow President Kimball to enter this room, and that's because the Legion has the room booby-trapped with C4. I wanted to try to do this myself, so heading to the top floor of the visitor center, we can unlock the door to his safe room, which is locked with a very hard lock, and then inside we can plant the C4 anywhere.
Hello.
When done, we head outside and then talk to Kato to trigger the event. Now, if we cause a scene, all guns will be focused on us. So the best way to force Kimball into his safe room, I figured, would be to destroy his vertibird. After all, without the vertibird, he can't rightly leave, can he? So, donning an NCR engineer uniform, we can pass by Private Jensen and scale the ladder to the helipad. I tried destroying this vertibird a number of ways. I threw a couple sticks of dynamite at it. That didn't work. Then I tried using my grenade rifle Thump Thump.
Jeremy Watson never had easy. His father was a caravan guard on the shore. And his mother...
That did the trick, but I was too close to the vertibird. The explosion killed me. I tried this a couple more times from a few different angles, but discovered that no matter where I was standing on top of the helipad, I was always too close to the vertibird, and it didn't matter what weapon I used. If the vertibird explodes and you're on the helipad, you will die. So, I jumped down from the helipad and started lobbing grenades with my grenade rifle in an arc to land on the vertibird. I finally managed to blow it up, but even this was too close to the vertibird. So I had to do something drastic. I moved to the western ridge. From here I was close enough to get a good view of the vertibird, but I was too far away from my grenade rifle. I simply couldn't hit the vertibird from here. So instead I pulled out my sniper rifle. It took a few shots, but after a while...
12 years ago, they called out for help, and the Republic heard of them. Troopers, Rangers just like you, answered the clarion call.
The vertibird explodes. Kimball ends his speech, and he and his Rangers race towards the visitor center. I pulled out the detonator, pulled the trigger. Okay, I see Kimball and the Rangers running around on top of the helipad, and then I complete Arizona Killer. Well, I was glad that I completed the quest, but I was confused as to what happened. They should have gone through the front door at the top of the stairs and then into the safe room, not climb the ladder to the helipad. So I tried again, and this time I completed the quest even before pulling out my detonator. I pulled the trigger of the detonator, but didn't hear an explosion. After the commotion died down, I went into the visitor center to verify that the C4 exploded, only to discover that it was still there. So I'm kind of at a loss for this one. It looks as if the C4 detonator doesn't work between zones. So I wasn't able to detonate it while standing outside, and yet I still completed the quest by destroying the vertibird. So I don't know what ultimately happened to President Kimball here, but it looks as if we destroy the vertibird, he somehow just dies. I then tried to sabotage the landing pad itself. I figured if I place a bunch of frag mines right at the end of the ladder, where Kimball is forced to stand when he returns to his vertibird, that it might blow him up. However, the moment I pulled out the frag mine, I somehow caused an alarm. Kimball ends his speech and begins racing towards the helipad. I took out my sniper rifle and shot a nearby ranger.
Help!
But while I was thus engaged, Kimball and his rangers boarded the vertibird, so they didn't trigger my mines, frustratingly. But I figured, well, maybe I can just shoot this thing out of the sky. And sure enough, that is a viable option. Whoa. What on earth? Okay. We've got some sort of Doctor Who wormhole thing going on here. All right. And of course, there's always the most straightforward option imaginable. to go in guns blazing. I thought I could stand here in the crowd with my thump thump. But yeah, that didn't work. So instead, I went up the stairs and hid behind the wall until Kimball and his rangers emerged. Then, thump thump.
Murderer!
What have you done? What have you done? Check your
Fire! Murderer! Murderer! What the hell? Murderer!
And there we go. A perfectly acceptable solution. In this way, we can loot Kimball's corpse, or we can get a key to Hoover Dam and loot his unique President Kimball suit, the stats of which I covered in my video on the NCR solution. And there you have it. Those are all of the ways I experimented with to complete this quest. Now, this is certainly not an exhaustive list. We could do this any number of ways. We could use the Euclid Sea Finder, planting C4 on the helipad before the vertibird even arrives, planting C4 on the path that Kimball takes to get to the stage, sneaking up behind some of the rangers if our sneak skill is high enough, and reverse pickpocketing C4 onto their inventory, standing on one of the towers with a fat man, and just raining down nuclear fire. The best thing about this quest is it's really open-ended. They have a number of scripted ways to go about it, but ultimately, we're limited only by our own creativity. Now we can check in with Caesar or Lucius to tell them of our success. But before we do, in our next episode, we're going to explore other ways we can help the Legion elsewhere in the Mojave, at Cottonwood Cove and Nelson in particular. I take Sundays off, so I'm not going to have a video for you on Monday, but never fear, I'll be back with more episodes of this series Tuesday and all through next week. How did you end up assassinating President Kimball? Did you manage to make it through those eagle-eyed NCR Rangers? Or did you just go in guns blazing and tear people to shreds? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I publish new Fallout videos every single week here on my channel, so if you want to make sure you don't miss my next episode, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. I've got a brand new shirt in the shop. The Profligate's days are numbered. You can find this shirt in a variety of both men's and women's sizes and in a wide array of colors. My designs also come on other products, smartphone cases, pillows, posters, prints, etc. So if interested, you can find a link to my shop in the description below, or you can click here. If you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon this coming week with more brand new videos.